So, so much of the inverted commas enemy that we're facing don't exist. The structure isn't there anymore. And so, on the other side of it too, is that we didn't have a yes movement. You know, we didn't have a grassroots at the beginning of the last referendum. We have a grassroots right now. We are organising, but we exist. And we didn't exist last time. So it's that stuff that you need to take into consideration when the next campaign happens. A lot of the things that you were talking about with the Constitution, that's why having the Constitution as a question at the moment, the Yes campaign last time, the 26% or whatever it was of us that were Yesers before the campaign started, went out and convinced and educated and taught the 45% enter. That's how it happened. It wasn't the BBC didn't convert anybody for us. We didn't have radio, we didn't have television, we didn't have anything. We did it ourselves. And this time we're at 45%. So we just need to go out and use the campaign as an education event, you know. However long it is, use that to educate people around us. I mean, there's business plans that are predicated around events, you know. That's how you get something started, an event, and the campaign is the event. That's how you get everybody interested, taking you seriously, listening to what you're saying, instead of just thinking you're just another political nut that goes on and on and on about this. This is when people are listening during the campaign. So I think it's not going to be the same campaign that we had last time. We've come leaps and bounds. How many people trust the BBC? Really trust the BBC the way they did before? That's gone. So we're starting at a much higher base than we did then, and we nearly did it. Very just. So I'm very confident in this. You know, I don't think there's anything to be down about. I just think that we need to learn the lessons that we picked up at the last one and act on them and get organised and be ready for when the campaign is called. That's it.
I think there's probably a distinction to make. I mean, you're absolutely right. You know, come with the hour, come with the energy, come with the focus, come with all kinds of things. And that's absolutely true about the campaign. But Scotland is kind of weak in its civic institutions, actually, because we've been quite party-led for a long time. We've been quite top-down. We're a part of Britain, I'm afraid. And actually, the most that people can imagine is being a bit better than England at stuff. Because how would you think otherwise if you haven't lived abroad? You know, it's a shocker when you do go and spend any time abroad and you come back and just think, that's not good enough. You know, being a couple of percentage better at England at stuff, that's crap. So somewhere in the civic scheme of things, we need to develop that muscularity that the Icelanders easily have, you know, where they are, you know, even if they get the brush off by politicians, they're hanging on the back of that thing. They're going to get that blinking constitution through. And actually, the speaker that came over said, the way it's getting through is that even though it hasn't been adopted, strangely, it's guiding all the political decisions that are being made. It's as if it has been adopted because it was so discussed and so sort of understood. So there's two distinct things. Of course, you're right. When the campaign comes, we'll all get on the horse. But the thing is, we have, you know, the strength of the bairn, as in the new country that will be born, is very related to the strength of the mother. And this period we're in, this is the kind of 9 months. We need to have that bairn pretty much born, hit the ground running, you know. And I think the work we do now on ourselves, unpacking a lot of the deference we've had for decades and centuries, unpacking a lot of the unfairness we never dreamed we could ever shift, learning to trust one another, not just with sharing our views, but sharing aspects of our lives, and moving forward with these different ways of owning things and different types of projects. If you're a part of something that you suggested, for example, like trying to do a streaming thing, okay, it's not going to be the campaign, but it's going to be the beginning of developing a little bit of muscle. you know, a little bit of light lifting, because we're going to do some heavy lifting. So my interest in all these things is to get us into a better shape to be a patient almost. Sorry, you can see I'm a woman with a hip replacement operation coming up. You've got to, you know, there's nothing much you can do. The surgeon's in charge, but you can be the best patient you can be. And we need to be the best civic Scots we can be, because that's the bit we can do now. So all of that needs us to start behaving and expecting different things, and expecting different things of politicians. We're not going to be a situation where a party's going to lead us with no other say in it again. We're never going to be in a situation where one leader of a party can decide to have a shared currency without even discussing it with his cabinet, which is what happened. Now, much as you're, you know, many of you, no doubt, all of you are members of the SNP, you know, people can kind of see there needs to be air in the room. We need to have more cooperation. So that's I think if we become independent-minded people, we will become independent. Yep. Last in the front.
Just to widen the audience a bit, do you ever get the opportunity, or have you ever invited into colleges and universities, say for students that were studying politics, economics?
No.
What's the reason why not? Because you're not a member of a political party, so I thought you might be invited in. And
no, I think they're still very nervous. I mean, this is the difficulty in Britain about politics being seen as a kind of disease, or a kind of set of biases or prejudice. It's not that, you know, we have a civic society and you would be taught how to be a citizen. I mean, let's face it, we're not citizens, we're subjects. So an awful lot flows from politics being still a kind of bit of a, you know, feels like a bit of a marginal thing. So sure, I mean, you know, universities and schools, there's very, very few of them are courageous enough to say we should be expanding our thinking on that. I can do this whole talk without even mentioning independence. This is just an interesting thing to talk about. Nordic nations, for example. But I'll never get to do a programme about that anywhere because I'm biased now. You know, as soon as you put your head over the parapet, you cannot be used anymore as a kind of unbiased filter. But it's a shame. I think, you know, once we get back into campaign mode, there's got to be everybody who's working in schools and so on, some of this thinking and discussion has to happen now. I mean, let me ask you guys. I was in Shetland before the Snap election, and there was one school in Wales that had a hustings, you know, with the kids in it, which was kind of amazing actually that they let the public in. But I mean, did you have that here at your school? Schools? Right. Well, the thing is, you might not see arguing for a hustings in a Snap election with the dreaded Theresa May in charge as being anything to do with independence. But if you wouldn't even have an argument, if a hustings for that, you're never going to have, the second independence referendum will be a tougher jump to make. You know, there needs to be an attempt to get discussion about all sorts of politics that isn't the big scary one before it comes along. Because if you don't get the habit going, that's Beecher's Brook.
Yeah, I was just thinking, university students that are studying economics and politics, surely they've got speakers coming in from all sorts of areas. No?
Yeah, but I'm not professor something or other, am I? I'm not even a doctor or anything. So, you know, you're asking me personally. But yeah, it's difficult because, yes, you're quite right. If you were able to see that there's no, you know, there are shades of grey and there are different opinions that make up. In fact, that's what the whole of academia should be about, is understanding that there is no single fact, but lots of different perspectives. Yes, of course, there should be lots of different voices in there, but these institutions are part of the establishment. It's unlikely that they're going to be flinging the doors open anytime soon. I would say, however, that one notable exception has been Glasgow University, that actually has, I've done 2 or 3 talks about Blossom and stuff in Glasgow University, and I think Anton Muscatelli is a very fair-minded guy who is their principal. I say no more.
Did you win any over?
Sorry?
Did you win any of your audience over?
Well, I don't know. I don't go at the end saying, hey, you, did you get, did you get healed? Who knows?
Can we make this the last question?
Yeah, I just want to point something out. Just what you just said there, my daughter works for a private school. That's run by the Christian Brethren, and they had a debate on independence with the independence referendum within that school. So it does happen. It wouldn't happen in state schools. I was a teacher in the state school, it never happened, but it did happen in that school.
Did you say you used to work in the state schools?
Yes.
So why wouldn't it happen in state schools?
They would never allow it. The authority would never allow it. Even if the head teacher wanted to do it, the authority would stand down. This was an independent school and they did the debate. My daughter was actually a no voter until she didn't listen to me. Once that debate started, she was given the job of speaking to the Yes campaign, so she researched it. Once she researched it, then she changed to Yes.
That's interesting.
No, it did happen in
We did have schools that what happened is the no voting, the people who were supposed to speak for the no
Didn't turn
pulled
up.
out in the last minute, and then the school said, well, we can't have,
Yes.
and that was a policy that we did. So the next thing that happens, we have to get out. If they don't come up to discuss it, the discussion happens anyway, and that we have to somehow make that the norm, because it would.
Sure, but I think as with all things, a template is something people just tend to copy. If you could create a useful habit, then the next big thing that comes in gets treated the same way. Everything, there should be debates and all sorts of stuff happening now, to your point, about stuff that's not as scary as independence. Because once you get the habit of bringing people across the threshold, you'll be able to develop that habit. But if you can't even debate, the general election or Brexit.
But the key is that 16-year-olds were voting school kids, were voting, therefore they're actually going into the school. And that's what happened, that's how they refused before. But because 16-year-old school kids were voting in the referendum,
With all due respect, I didn't find that at all. The last time around I did one thing in a school in a Boyd, and I've got to say it's the scariest experience of my life actually. What was happening around the place, for sure, 16 and 17-year-olds were voting, so the schools were going, oh my God, we've got to do something about it. But what they were tending to do was debates from a standing start. No education, no going and researching it. They just, one day, they had a debate. And so it just took all the prejudice of what the kids had got from home, there was no run-up to it, and they ticked the box. Thank God we've done it. That's not good enough. There needs to be what we need to do is shift schools away from just this paralysing fear that politics is a disease. And that if you get involved in it, you'll catch it, you'll be accused of being partial, and the council will come down you like a ton of bricks. But the trouble is, the councils do come down on people like a ton of bricks for doing all sorts of things in schools. I know it. I know many people who are working in schools that can't even report that there are no social workers on duty when they've got kids that are in really difficult situations. So there's an awful scared community within schools in many respects, despite all the blah. There's a lot of fear in there, and there's a lot of top-down control, and there's a lot of jargony rubbish coming from on high. And when that's all true, you need the luck of the Irish to crack it.
Well, what you're saying is right. At the beginning of the debates that happened, 75%, 80% of the kids were no. But by the end of the entire campaign, it had completely reversed. And that's something that happened through conversation, through discussion. Now, okay, it happened in schools. If you got a debate in the school, we had debates in the school, but they were cancelled. It brought in that infection, that political infection, brought into the schools. It did actually happen. It tried to get controlled, but it actually brought in there. And it will happen again because 16-year-old school kids are voting. So it has to be discussed. And we've got so much more support from 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds who are involved in politics for the first time. And not from schools, but in the playground, because their pals were going to be voting and they were going to be voting. It was quite amazing.
Well, that's true. I think it's true. It's true that there's also a counter-cultural thing starts to happen. I mean, the more I remember, sorry, it was a long time Van Morrison fan. I remember that line you've got, you know, I believed in my soul after school. You know, so that kind of there's a demarcation in people's heads as to the stuff they get in school and then their soul after school. There's lots of things like the fashion movement that teaches Gaelic traditional learning. That's all out of school deliberately because that feels like a value area where you learn and take it to your heart. So there's lots of things to be said for having the formal bit of education being a bit sniffy about something that you then become intrigued about yourself. My concern is still, I'm not instrumental about any aspect of Scottish life. I'm not here to try to get to independence by just wangling our way through. We have to change ourselves. We have to change our society, or we end up with all the difficulties we have at the moment. We just pull them in, and it takes longer to deal with it all. We'll deal with it, but it takes unnecessarily long. Schools need to start being vigorous places on all sorts of issues, and they need to stop, they need to lose this crippling fear of local education authority control. So this is a long other discussion to get into, but my core thing is this, you know, the more we can encourage institutions to become more bottom-up, genuinely, not just kind of jargon-wise, and the more independent-minded people become, so that it's quite natural to look for lots of different views, that's the kind of set of people I would trust with anything, any decision. But people who are beholden, people who are frightened, people who are constantly looking over their shoulder for guidance, that's scary, you know. And I think that scares some no voters. They look around and they think, is this the vigorous set of people I want to be forging into the future with? So we need to get all this fear stuff out in the open on all sorts of issues, not just independence, because it is the Beecher's Brook of them all. It scares the living daylights out of most people in positions of authority. You can easily be starting to tackle this on some smaller issues that are much closer to home. The end.
Okay, well, I think we can all agree that's been a fantastic evening and food for thought in so many different ways. I've got to thank Lesley on behalf of everyone here for what's been a fascinating insight in the way in which the Nordic countries, I think, have approached their situation, both politically and economically. They're small countries, and if Scotland was to be independent, it's a small country. And with a small country, with politicians that we don't allow to go above their station, it means that if you meet the finance minister in the alleyway of, God forbid, Tesco, probably we would all like it to be Lidl or Aldi, you can have a chance of actually imposing some sort of social pressure on our government and the people that work for it. I think that's one of the great beauties about a small country. Having worked in Denmark and Sweden, I know that the Scandinavian model creates a much, much different society to the one that we've got today. But it certainly is one that we should aspire to, I would agree. So I want to say thanks again, Lesley, on behalf of everyone here.